Gunfire ripped through the cool Carson night, bouncing off the walls of a packed parking lot. Screams and screeching tires filled the air as people scrambled between cars. Under the harsh, yellow lights, a body lay still. Back in a small apartment near LAX, the silence was suffocating. Smoke still clung to their clothes, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone in the room. Among them was a kid who once lived in the biggest house on his block, now standing over a rival's body, marked by a set his own hood had long clashed with. A street kid. Some kids try to outrun the streets. Some grow up swallowed by them, and others go looking for them. Mule Buchanan, later known as Kelse, was born on November 24, 1994, in Los Angeles, California. His earliest years unfolded in Westmont, a pocket of South LA that carried two worlds in one. On one side, manicured lawns and freshly painted houses. On the other, sirens cutting through the night and walls tattooed with set politics. His block sat right in the middle. Kelse's father, a music producer with credits tied to Master P and Lil Romeo, kept royalty checks rolling through the mid-2000s. His mother held down the house, steady and present, giving her son structure. Together, they raised him in a 7,000-square-foot, six-bedroom home, the biggest on the stretch between Normandy and Western. Out back, there was space for cookouts and games. In the garage, there was room for friends to gather when the streets got too hot. His grandmother's house sat just blocks away in the hundreds, giving him another safe spot to fall back on. From early on, Kelse gravitated toward open spaces. He skated sidewalks for hours, perfecting tricks until he landed them clean. He and his friends rode fixed-gear bikes through side streets, weaving between cars. At the parks, pickup football ran until the streetlights flicked on. He danced, too, joining jerking crews that swept LA in the late 2000s, showing up at battles where your style mattered just as much as your moves. Around the block, older heads knew him as respectful, able to fit into different crowds without friction. Friends saw how easily he made people laugh and feel included. But underneath, there was a quiet need to be accepted. And when approval came from the right people, he chased it harder. For a while, Kelse's world held a stability many around him didn't have. But in Westmont, stability lived side by side with something heavier. The rolling 100s Crips, sets like the underground block Crips and original block Crips, held the neighborhood from 102nd to 108th Streets. Their presence was as normal as the corner store or the bus stop. Even living in a big house, you still learned who to nod at, when to look away, and when to keep moving. Kelse lingered on the edge of it, a familiar face in both quiet corners and louder ones. He wasn't all the way in, not yet, but his story was already leaning in that direction. When he hit Washington Prep High, he carried that same duality. Funny, quick with a joke, able to draw a crowd. He bounced between classmates who stayed in school and those who drifted out the gates. Sports and dance gave him visibility, and teachers noticed his potential. But so did the pull of the streets waiting outside. His parents tried shifting him to Narbonne High, hoping a different setting would reset his focus. It didn't stick. Kelse had trouble settling, and before long, he was back closer to home. Eventually, school slipped completely. Expelled before graduation, he lost the daily structure that had kept him balanced. Without classes to anchor him, the neighborhood took a bigger piece of his time. He wasn't officially in the underground block Crips, but he was close enough, posted on 105th Street, playing ball, hanging with people he'd known since middle school. That kind of association carried weight. It meant you were part of certain conversations and excluded from others. Street energy. At home, the garage turned into a late-night spot. Dice games under buzzing lights, music loud, friends stopping by from a block. Neighborhood parties kept him tied into the rhythm of local life. Kelse was still split between two worlds, one built on the comfort and security his parents provided, and another drifting toward the street energy waiting just outside his front door. By 2014, the line between Kelse's two lives, the stability his family built and the pull of the streets, was starting to disappear. The first big push came with a flocking case that put his name in the wrong conversations. Flocking had been a steady trend in Los Angeles for years. Small crews sliding into wealthy neighborhoods, knocking on doors to check if anyone was home, and hitting houses quick when the coast was clear. That year, Kelse was picked up in connection to one of these runs, a residential burglary tied to a crew moving out of the hundreds. The arrest report listed burglary as the charge, and for the first time, Kelse stood in court facing the real possibility of serious time behind bars. In a place like Westmont, catching a case wasn't just about fighting charges. It was also about proving how you carried yourself when the heat came down. Older Rolling Hundreds members were watching. And when Kelse came out the other side, the talk on the block was that he'd been officially put on with the Rolling Hundreds block crips, a step that locked him in for real. Being put on meant more than just hanging around. It meant representing. It meant riding when called. And it meant carrying both the opportunities and the weight that came with the set. The Rolling Hundreds were one of the most active neighborhood cards in Los Angeles, holding ground from 102nd down to 120th Street. Sets like the Underground Block Crips and the original Block Crips fell under their umbrella, and the politics stayed heavy. Kelse started showing up deeper at functions, pulling into other neighborhoods with members, letting people know he was down for whatever. Before long, whispers tied his name to more serious things. On the streets, people spoke about him like he was putting up Rookie of the Year numbers, rumors floating about shootings tied to him before he even turned 21. None of those alleged bodies ever turned into official charges. But in a world where reputation often mattered more than paperwork, those whispers carried weight. His rap sheet began stacking quick. After coming home in September 2015, he was picked up again, this time for DUI. Then came a charge for loitering with a criminal street gang. Not long after, taking a vehicle without consent. Then another burglary case. Each arrest made the next one easier to picture, and each one made it harder to imagine him stepping back into any kind of normal life. Within the Rolling Hundreds, there was a mentality expected of members, what people in LA called the crash-out mindset. It meant you were willing to risk it all without hesitation, especially if it meant proving loyalty or defending the set. Kelse showed that mindset clearly, quick to pull up when called, ready to move without asking too many questions. That energy got noticed by both his enemies and his own circle. Loyalty. By the end of 2015, the transformation was obvious. The kid who once split time between skating, dance crews, and quiet nights at home was now living almost fully outside, around people who demanded constant proof of where his loyalty stood. His choices shifted, his schedule shifted, and the weight of those moves was stacking in ways that couldn't be ignored. But even before the flocking case and the rap sheet, Kelse had already carved a name in a different world, one that wasn't about gangs at all. Back in the jerking era, when LA kids filled parking lots and parks for street dance battles, he crossed paths with other young names who would later shape LA culture. One of them was Darryl Caldwell, who the world would come to know as Drakeo the Ruler. At first, they weren't close, but there was mutual respect. Both could hold their own, whether in style and dance or just in how they moved around a crowd. By 2014, that respect had grown into something tighter. Drakeo was stepping out of the dance scene and into music, carving out a sound that was nothing like what LA had heard before. His breakout came in 2015 with Mr. Godot, a DJ Mustard-produced track that premiered on WorldStar and ran up millions of views. That same year, his first mixtape hit, pulling attention across the city. The Los Angeles Times even called him one of the most original voices to come off the coast in years. As his momentum grew, Drakeo started forming his own circle, a crew that blended family, close friends, and allies tied to different sets. They first called it the Too Greedy Family, but soon most people knew them as the Stink Team. It wasn't just a rap collective. Loyalty ran deep. Many members were tied to neighborhoods that didn't move soft, some from the 30s, some from the 40s, some from the hundreds. And even those not officially banging carried themselves with that same edge. Kelse was one of the early locks for Draco's inner circle. By 2014 and 2015, his bond with the rising rapper had grown tight enough that rolling with the Stink Team wasn't just an option. It was the natural move. Their connection strengthened one night when Draco was looking for promethazine with codeine, and Kelse's side of the hundreds made it happen. From that point on, Kelse was everywhere, posted in the background of music videos, on stage at shows, and side by side with Draco at events across the city. It was more than just proximity. It gave Kelse a new lane of visibility, one foot in the music industry and one firmly planted in the streets. The Stink Team carried themselves with a particular kind of energy that fit perfectly with the era. Designer clothes, foreign cars, stacks of money on Instagram, and raps sharp enough to call out enemies by name. Draco branded himself as Mr. Mosley, but everyone in their orbit repped the Too Greedy/Stink Team banner. They were young, flashy, unapologetic, and that image fueled both their following and their reputation. For Kelse, the benefits ran on both tracks. On the music side, he was part of a crew booking shows and headlining smaller venues while building toward bigger stages. On the street side, he was moving with people who had respect across multiple neighborhoods. But that blend, gang connections and music exposure, kept the crew under constant surveillance from both rivals and law enforcement. The nightlife, the studio sessions, the trips out of the city all gave Kelse glimpses of a different type of success. But reality never stayed far. Old rivalries still mattered, and Draco's tendency to name-drop enemies in his lyrics meant some sets took the disrespect personal. By late 2015 and into 2016, tension was boiling, fueled less by record sales and more by long-standing street politics. For Kelse, being with the Stink Team meant more than holding down his friend. It meant carrying both roles, the supporter and loyalist at Draco's side, and the neighborhood soldier expected to hold the line if anyone pressed. His name now circulated in two very different conversations: industry circles watching for the next Stink Team release, and street circles debating who was riding with who. By 2015, Los Angeles was heating up again. One of the oldest and ugliest rivalries between the Rolling Hundreds and the Inglewood Family Gangster Bloods, IFGB, was back in the spotlight. The families had deep roots, holding turf around Rogers Park and carrying weight across both the streets and the county jail system. The Rolling Hundreds, meanwhile, had their own legacy across Westmont and beyond. Beef between the two sides had flared for years, fueled by territory disputes, personal grudges, and the kind of disrespect that never fully fades. In 2015 and 2016, the climate across South LA was already charged. That summer, the infamous 100 Days, 100 Nights challenge rattled the city, with threats of 100 bodies in 100 days after a young man tied to the Rolling 60s was killed. The Rolling Hundreds weren't at the center of that storm, but the ripple left every set on high alert. And the music industry wasn't exempt. Draco's star was climbing fast, but his beef with fellow LA rapper RJ tied directly into gang politics. Disrespect in music could spill over into real-world violence, and often did. Hovering in that storm was a figure who would soon become central to Kelse's story. A visible IFGB member known as Red Bull. His presence in videos and at events made him a recognizable face, and in LA, recognition often meant confrontation. By 2016, low-level clashes between the Rolling Hundreds and the IFGB were stacking up. Shootings, drive-bys, close calls, each side keeping their own tally. The tension was like dry wood waiting for a spark. That spark came on December 10, 2016. The night was supposed to be a simple celebration, a birthday party in Carson big enough to draw a serious crowd. Security was light, the lot outside filling with cars, music thumping from the walls, and people laughing like politics weren't heavy in the air. Earlier that evening, a handful of Stink Team members, including Kelse, had been at Draco's apartment near LAX. After a while, they decided to roll out. And they didn't roll small, 5 cars deep, a convoy moving from the apartment to the Carson spot. The kind of move that let everyone know they weren't just guests, they were stepping in as a unit. Word travels fast at parties like that. And somewhere between the walk from the lot to the front door, a Stink Team affiliate pulled Kelse aside and told him flat out, "The families are here." It wasn't just a warning, it was a reminder. The air inside that party was heavy with people tied to a set that had long history with the Rolling Hundreds. Kelse knew it meant eyes would be on him. Inside, the crowd was thick, the music was loud, and the walls felt like they were closing in. And that's when Kelse saw him, Red Bull, posted with his crew, his red gear catching the flicker of the party lights. Their eyes met briefly, but in street terms, that glance was enough to turn a normal night into a lethal one. Witnesses later said it felt like the music and noise paused for a heartbeat, as if both men measured what would happen in that split second. Then, the first gunshot cut through the bass line, followed almost immediately by more. Panic erupted. People scrambled, ducked behind cars and walls, shouting, pushing toward exits as the gunfire continued. Witnesses saw Kelse wielding a .40 Glock, firing toward Red Bull's side of the room, while AB, another man from the convoy, added chaos with a .38 revolver. Outside, engines screamed as the convoy regrouped in the lot, tires skidding over asphalt while terrified partygoers ran for cover. The ride back to Draco's apartment was silent. Adrenaline still coursed through their veins, and the reality of the night weighed heavily. By the time the sun rose, word had already spread. Red Bull was dead, 2 others were wounded, and the streets were buzzing. Kelse didn't shy away from the notoriety. Not long after, he posted online with the caption, "Dead Bull." The line lit up social feeds, leaving no doubt about who was claiming responsibility. Law enforcement, meanwhile, had been trailing threads of a separate case when a wiretap mentioned Draco's name. That single slip pulled the Stink Team directly into their sights. Detectives began piecing together names, voices, and connections, layering it atop visuals from music videos, most notably Chunky Monkey, where guns were openly displayed. A silver Infiniti SUV appeared in the frame, and faces matched eyewitness accounts from the party. Each detail stacked into a growing mountain of probable cause. On January 2, 2017, police moved on multiple fronts. Warrants hit simultaneously, doors were broken down, people pulled from beds, phones, clothing, and any evidence linking them to the Carson party seized. Kelse was among those taken. Inside the station, the atmosphere turned icy. Detectives weren't just working off photos and videos. They had informants embedded, prison cellmates whose job was to start casual conversation and fish for confessions. They moved through the system like shadows, slipping into cells and drawing out chatter. One informant got AB talking. In the reports, AB named himself and others, giving cops a critical opening. From there, pressure intensified on the crew's weakest links. AB admitted being at the party, armed, and not acting alone. Kelse's name came up casually, but in an investigation, nothing is ever small. The detectives uncovered another piece connecting the scene to Solo, a member of the Circle, whose Facebook video showed him holding a gun later matched by ballistics to the shooting. That alone was enough to bring him in and start pressing for cooperation. Interrogations ran long, with detectives showing evidence, discussing charges, and pushing angles until cracks appeared. Solo began slipping, little admissions creeping into recorded conversations until the chain of connections became undeniable. By the time ballistics, videos, statements, and informant testimony were combined, investigators had a complete chain. Witnesses tied to the scene, firearms linked to suspects, and conversations filling in the gaps. Every move from the January raid had been part of a strategy to wall in the Stink Team, tightening the net around every member. By early 2019, the walls were closing in around Kelse, AB, and anyone else law enforcement could tie in. The Compton courthouse became the stage for one of the most high-profile gang trials in recent Los Angeles history. The prosecution painted a sweeping story, connecting Kelse's upbringing and the infamous Carson party shooting, casting him and AB as the shooters, while framing Draco as the mastermind orchestrating a conspiracy to eliminate a known rival. The jury had already been exposed to the Stink Team name for years, from news headlines to music blogs. Solo took the stand and delivered a full account of the Carson incident. He claimed to have seen Kelse raise a .40 Glock, while AB fired a .38 revolver into the crowd where Red Bull fell. Solo went further, recounting alleged shootings involving Kelse, citing streets, names, and threats that supposedly followed those events. The state used these accounts to demonstrate a pattern of violent behavior. The prosecution also leaned heavily on rap lyrics and music videos. They froze frames from Stink Team visuals where Kelse appeared in designer clothing, holding firearms, then matched those weapons to images from the Chunky Monkey video and ballistics reports. Their argument: the music and imagery were confessions, not just entertainment. The defense countered, claiming the lyrics were artistic expression and video's performance. But the courtroom atmosphere still felt weighted against Kelse, especially with gang enhancement statutes amplifying every charge. When the verdicts finally dropped, the result was staggering. Draco walked free on all conspiracy counts, while Kelse was convicted across the board. The sentence hit like a sledgehammer. Life without the possibility of parole plus 135 years, a number that felt more like a message than simple punishment. AB received his own hefty sentence, leaving the Stink Team fractured and reeling. Families wept in the gallery as deputies moved the defendants out, while reporters outside captured every detail for the morning headlines. On the streets, the story of the Westmont kid, who had thrown himself headlong into the rolling hundreds life, had officially become another LA cautionary tale. When Kelse entered the California prison system, he encountered a new kind of jungle, a world where every move could earn respect or regret, and every word could tip the balance of power. He learned fast to keep his circle tight, his back covered, and his mind sharper than ever. The Rollin' Hundred's name still carried weight behind those gates, giving him allies in blue rags who ensured he stood solid from day one, but also attracting attention from enemies eager for revenge. Discipline became his lifeline. He avoided unnecessary drama, maintained focus, and defended his set's name whenever needed. One of his first bold statements behind bars was a tattoo crossing out the IFGB logo, a permanent line that left no doubt about where his loyalty lay. In that environment, a single tattoo could be both a mark of respect and a provocation. Kelse structured his days around workouts, chess games, and long phone calls, keeping his mind sharp as the years stacked up. But the news from the outside world still hit hard. In December 2021, word came that Draco, the ruler, had been stabbed to death at the Once Upon a Time in LA concert. For Kelse, it was like a steel bar to the chest. Not only had he lost a close friend, but it also underscored the harsh reality that even those who succeed in the industry remain vulnerable to the same cycles they once lived in. That night, Kelse sat in his cell, reflecting on the laughter, the schemes, the music videos, and how quickly the streets could erase a man's future. Kelse didn't let prison mute him completely. He kept the music alive, sending verses out through collect calls, trusting producers to lay his words over beats, and relying on people outside to keep his name circulating in the scene. Ralphie the Plug, Draco's younger brother, stayed loyal, making sure Kelse's name appeared in interviews, lyrics, and conversations. The Hood kept looking out for him too, dropping money on his books and sharing stories that reminded him he hadn't been forgotten.